Greetings, everyone. You are now tuned in to the Maria Cozette Show, where the left brain meets the right. I have an exceptional guest today, a highly accomplished physicist, as well as a very talented photographer. So stay tuned for that. And of course, for any further information about the show, visit mariacozette.com/television. I have a fantastic guest today, a very unique and accomplished individual, a physicist and a fantastic photographer. How are you, Dr. Peroomian?
Thank you very much.
I'm so happy to have you here.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, your professional background and then all your beautiful photography. So we have a lot to talk about. But first, let's discuss your professional background, both as a physicist, as a professor, and then, of course, in your leadership roles.
Sounds good. Well, my journey, as far as my profession is concerned, started at UCLA a long time ago. I got my undergraduate degree in physics and then followed that up with a PhD, also in physics. And my specialty was space weather, which is how Earth's environment reacts to changes in the sun, solar flares, and that, and you know, effects on satellites and human systems. For the first 25 years or so after that, I did research funded by NASA and the National Science Foundation. But slowly but surely during that time, I started teaching, and I realized that that's really where my passion lies. So over the course of a couple of decades, I've gone from being purely research to purely teaching, and really specializing in pedagogy. So that 4 years ago, when I made this very drastic change after being at UCLA for close to 3 decades, I jumped across the city to USC. Now I'm in charge of their program for undergraduate GE programs in astronomy, and also we're developing a new program for training high school physics teachers. So that's as far as my professional life is concerned.
Yeah.
As far as in the community, I've served on the Glendale College Board of Trustees for the last 14 years now. I'm presently the president of the board, and I've got 1 more year to go on my in my term until it's time for a re-election again.
Right.
But that's been my main way of giving back to the community in the last 14 years or so, and making a change at Glendale College, both for the Armenian community and for Glendale in general.
Yeah, I mean, you're such an inspiration in the community. And again, it's an honor for me to have somebody like you here, all the more so to talk about your art. So I know that you are a professor of astronomy and physics, and so it's incredible to me how you've integrated that knowledge into your photography. So let's talk about that, and maybe particular elements, in landscapes or whatever it is that you're photographing that you see or you notice, or maybe you look for that others may not see, particular intricacies, or, how do you see the world?
Well, what my eye is usually drawn to are patterns, repetitious parts of the landscape. Whether it's the layering of trees and mountain and cloud on top of that, or it's a cloud that has shaped itself into the shape of something in the foreground of the landscape. That's usually where my eye goes. So it's the patterns, the negative spaces that clouds create with the sky. That's where I'd say some of my physics side of my brain comes in.
Yeah.
And then more recently, I've been doing a lot of astrophotography, and of course that brings in my love of astronomy along with photography, and whether it's chasing after the Milky Way or special events, lunar eclipses, that's where really planning comes in, and knowledge of astronomy really helps.
Yeah, and so you said planning, so I must ask you, do you travel to photograph, or do you photograph when you travel?
Both, actually. When I used to present my research at conferences, I traveled quite a lot for that, and I would always take the time to photograph because it would usually be somewhere that I would otherwise not go to.
Right.
But I do absolutely travel for photography. I've been to Armenia many times, and some of them have been family trips. Some of them have been, even for science conferences. But I've also taken some very nice trips in, where I was by myself and just photographing the landscape.
Yeah.
So a little bit of both.
Yeah, you've photographed some of my favorite places, the Canyonlands, Zion Canyon, the Sierras, Death Valley, and the list goes on. Is there a particular place you visited or perhaps an experience that resonated with you?
Well, one of the things I've tried to do, and my family is now part of the game here, is we love going on road trips. And so,
Me too. I love road trips.
Every road trip is its own adventure.
Yes.
Whether it's to Yosemite or Death Valley or somewhere else, and we've taken road trips even all the way to Utah and back. But every road trip is unique because it brings the human element of the family together with waking up early in the morning and wondering who's going to wake up with me this early in the morning to go and photograph, to seeing the new places together. So I think every one of those trips has its own wonder about it, and I always look forward to those.
Yeah, and really those places are very photogenic.
Oh, they
so
are.
I wanted to ask you as a photographer, what does photogenic mean to you? Because some people even will tell you, or just in general say, oh, I'm photogenic, I'm not, or she's photogenic, or a particular even landscape could be photogenic. So as a photographer, what does that term mean to you?
It means that things have come together. And I think because the word photo implies light, I think light is the most important part of being photogenic. If the most beautiful landscape on planet Earth, be it in Armenia, be it in Yosemite, you go there at high noon, it's not photogenic. But if you go there during the magic hour, if you're there an hour before sunset or right before the sun's coming out, then even landscape that you would perhaps not photograph at other times of the day becomes photogenic because of that magical light.
I see. And so a lot of times you hear that term magic hour, and I'm sure maybe our audience members don't know what magic hour is. So what is it about that hour of the day that makes it magic?
It usually lasts a bit longer than an hour, but what it implies is this. When the sun is lower in the sky, its rays have to travel through much more atmosphere than if it's directly above.
I see.
So if we look up, we're going to see maybe 10 kilometers of atmosphere, maybe 20. But if the sun's on the horizon, it's coming to us through about 200 kilometers of horizon, if not more. And that disperses the sun's rays so that even the red light gets dispersed. That's why sunsets are red. And so that quality of light, that golden light, really changes the character of the landscape. And it's a softer light, and the shadows aren't as harsh, and the goldenness of it really appeals to, I guess, to the human psyche.
Yes, it does. It's very beautiful. And in fact, I've noticed colors to be very vivid also when it's gloomy or when it's, a rainy day. The colors come out very nicely. In
Gloomy
photos.
days are the best days to photograph trees and foliage. So yes, the colors pop.
So let's talk about Infraredscapes, something you started to do and look into in 2008. What is that all about?
Right. I think it's the perfect juxtaposition of physics and photography, because infrared light is the part of the light spectrum that our eyes can't see. It's just beyond red. And sometimes it's been called the color of warmth, even though technically it's not a color. But in 2008, after I'd been shooting infrared film for a while, I decided to convert one of my cameras to only shoot in infrared light. So usually cameras shoot the color spectrum, the rainbow of colors that our eyes see. Those colors were now blocked, and my camera would only see infrared and would only shoot black and white. And so Infraredscapes was a term I came up with to describe my adventure, which began in 2008, and actually Armenia was one of the first places I visited with an infrared camera. And the landscape looks very, very different. As I said, it's the color of warmth. So if you see a tree in a black and white picture, you're going to see lots of grays. Yeah. But when you look at it with an infrared camera, what you see is the leaves glowing white, and the trunk is usually much darker.
Right.
Sky is pure black. The clouds are pure white. So it's that contrast,
Yeah.
and the fact that you're seeing the landscape in a completely different way that really appealed to me. And starting from Armenia, I spent the next 5 years almost exclusively photographing infrared and in black and white. So
wow, amazing. I mean, your photos are really just something else, you know, really just something else. And so let's talk about Armenia. You know, you've been going there since the early 80s, so you've seen a lot of change. First, let's talk about what changes you've seen, and then if you can tell us a little bit about your photographic experiences there.
Right. Well, I'm going to avoid the obvious, but as far as the landscape is concerned, as far as traveling out of Yerevan is concerned, and that's what I love to do. You know, if I'm there for a week, I usually spend maybe half a day in Yerevan,
Yeah.
and the rest is on the road. But obviously, in 1980 and 81, the first couple of times I was there, it was the Soviet era, and life was very, very different. But let's fast forward, say, to 2003. And what you would see is it was a slow process by which the people of Armenia were coming to grips with that this was finally their own land.
Right.
It took a while. You would drive to some of our most picturesque places, and I would be very, very frustrated. You would be going to Sanahin, and it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And the last curve in the road where all of these tour buses are going was the city dump.
Oh.
And so that's what you would drive by. And even worse, in Spitak, you would drive into town, and a kilometer out of town, for the entire kilometer, was a dump.
Heartbreaking, yeah.
Yeah, and thankfully, though, that attitude changed. And the last several times I've been there, all of that has been cleaned up. And I used to complain that, you know, in the U.S. we have the saying, take only photographs, leave only footsteps.
Yeah.
You know, all it takes is for some place to be picturesque in Armenia, and unfortunately it gets overrun with food and picnicking, and you know, again, that's slowly started changing.
Right.
But more and more you're seeing ownership of the land, ownership of the landscape, and you don't have to deal with these as much. There's been a lot of effort put into creating national parks, protecting them.
Yes,
you know,
thank goodness.
yes, and going out of their way to protect ancient trees. You know, I love ancient trees and love photographing them, and some of the stories you hear of, you know, just roads being put through forests just for the, you know, for the sake of logging, and thankfully most of those have been blocked.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest change is that the people of Armenia have woken up to realize this is their own.
Yes.
It's not this attitude that whatever's outside my front door is no longer mine, but it is that the entire country is there. So I think that's the most positive change I've seen as far as traveling through Armenia is concerned, photographically.
Yeah, beautiful. And then are there any particular spots you like to go to?
There are a couple of spots. I mean, I've been there 16 times, and I think the total, it adds up to over 6 months, but still I'm discovering Armenia. You know, I think one of the most amazing experiences I had in Armenia was actually in Artsakh. And, you know, a group of us, led by one of my friends, Stepan Nalbandian, we went to unveil a church. And my first question to him was, how do you unveil a church? And it turned out that hunters in a remote village in Artsakh had found an 11th century church.
Wow.
In the woods, completely covered with brambles and bushes, and
Wow.
you know, khachkars broken all around.
Yeah.
So he'd put together a team, and we went over. We stayed in that village. We stayed with the. There was only 6 houses in that village at that time. We stayed there 2 nights. We cleaned up the church. It was a very tiny, you know, old village type church. But when we cleaned up the khachkars, we even found inscriptions of when it was constructed, who was the prince that constructed it. And so it was an amazing experience
That is
of
amazing, yeah.
finding this ancient ruins and restoring it as much as we could, taking photographs, obviously, drawing the floor plan, and actually publishing an article in a journal to present it to the world.
Wow.
So I think that was one of the most profound experiences I've had in Armenia.
Absolutely profound, yes. So let's talk about your book. It's amazing. And so it's on Amazon, of course, everybody. It's on Amazon. And for the past 3 years, you've also been publishing this calendar, which you gifted me. Thank you so much. And you've been autographed. I love it. It's honestly amazing. So let's talk about the process in publishing this book.
Well, the book started out, I had this illusion that I was going to be able to write a guidebook for photographing Armenia. You know, guidebooks exist for Yosemite, Zion,
right.
But of course, when you think about it, they're much smaller places. So as I started traveling through Armenia, and the first essay in that book is starting from 2003, I realized that no, what I really wanted to do was catalog my journeys, talk about my experiences, and put together not a photo essay, but an essay accompanied by my photographs, kind of the backstory of what I was living through to take these pictures.
Yes, and I love that you've done that. I love
the experiences. So the book contains 12 photo essays, spanning from 2003 to 2011. Of course, I've written 2 more photo essays since then. They're on my website, but I haven't had an occasion to follow that up with another book yet. That's one of my coming projects. But that's what the photographic journey represents. It's about 8 years of traveling through Armenia, taking photographs in remote locations. The story of the church in Artsakh is one of the essays in there, as are some others. So that was the culmination of 8 years of photographing, and I decided to put the book together, all the typesetting, layout, and sending it to the publisher. It took a while, but it was done.
You know what, I'm very, the reason why I started this show is to talk to these accomplished professionals who have this creative side, and I've discovered even more so in, having this discussion with you, it's so, beyond commendable, the time you find to follow your passion so intensely, with all the other facets of your life. So it's just really, very inspiring to see that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then what about the calendar? Let's talk about this photo, by the way, because I absolutely love this photo. How did you capture this?
So that actually, it turned out to be a really good happenstance, because 2 of my kids were at the Home and Intimate Jamboree in Armenia last summer.
Okay.
And spur of the moment, my wife and I decided, let's go to Armenia. And as soon as we booked our tickets, I was looking to see if there's anything happening there, and I realized there's a lunar eclipse. I go, okay, fantastic. That's exactly perfect. And so first thing that came to my mind was, okay, where do I photograph it? It has to be outside the city. I had, an image in my mind that, brought together the eclipsed moon, and Mars was very prominent last summer. This was, last summer. So, and I wanted to bring in perhaps the Milky Way, because when it gets fully the moon gets fully eclipsed, it becomes very dark, and you can actually see many more stars in the Milky Way. And I kind of decided I would do this at Thornbird Fortress. So to bring together something from the 7th century, an ancient fortress, with a astronomical event, and put the 2 together.
It.
So I had one of my friends drive me there, and I stayed there for about 5 hours. The photo is a montage of 23 photos that were taken. Camera steady, nothing changed on the camera, except as the moon was getting darker and darker, the exposure had to change. But the camera settings otherwise did not change. The camera was on a tripod. And so as soon as the moon began to be eclipsed, the photo started. And what you see there is every 10 minutes an image of the moon until it's fully eclipsed. And at midnight, when the moon was fully eclipsed, That's when I did the background image, which is a 30-second exposure. I'd actually taken a small portable LED light with me, so the lighting you see on the castle is me lighting it with a LED light myself, because there's no lights there.
Yeah.
And it was and after the restaurant that's next to Armenian closed, it was pitch dark and then sometimes a little bit scary, but it turned out well. I mean,
it was well worth it.
I can tell you, I got home past 2 a.m. and I did not go to sleep until I produced that image.
Yeah,
so I was very excited with what I had. So
and I had never been there. I went this past fall, one of my favorite places. It's such a magical place, really.
It is. Yes.
And so you have a very impressive lineup of exhibits that you've done in the past. Is there anything that we can expect in the coming future?
I'm definitely working towards one. I don't have a date for you, but there should be one coming up perhaps in the beginning of next year.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And then my final question that I ask all my guests is, why is it important to be a multifaceted professional and to have this creative outlet?
I think life requires balance. So, all of us have very busy lives. And, as my wife will attest, every time I don't have a trip planned in the near future, I almost get stir crazy. I have to have something planned. I need to know that I'm getting away in a couple of weeks to photograph, to be able to go through my day.
Right.
And it really helps when you're able to put everything aside. In the summer, I usually do a backpacking trip. Cell phones don't work for 3 days. It's absolutely necessary.
Yes.
It is absolutely necessary to disconnect. And if you can do what you're passionate about, in my case, photography, and bring together, the love of nature and photography and everything, and be able to relax and set your mind at ease, I think it's very important.
Absolutely. Well said. You're such a very colorful individual, and truly it was a blessing to have you here on the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Me.
Yeah, my pleasure. And so stay tuned for more of the Maria Cozette Show. Know the Greats, where we spotlight a legend, and today we spotlight my favorite Armenian artist of all time. Artur Meshchan is an Armenian architect, musician, composer, poet, singer, and painter. He is also known as one of the founders of Armenian rock. He is the author of different architectural projects, including Guest House and the new building of Matenadaran in Armenia. At the age of 7, he started taking violin and piano lessons, and during those years made his first steps in writing songs and joined the boys' chorus at the National Academic Theatre for Opera and Ballet. Sometime later, while still in school, Meshchan wrote some of his early masterpieces, including Where Were You, God? Kam Urer Astvats. In 1967, Meshchan, along with his friends Levon Melikian and Gregory Nalbandian, founded a rock band, which they simply referred to as the Band of the Department of Architecture. After giving a series of concerts, the band gained an immense deal of acclaim among the youth. By blending Armenian spiritual music and the thriving rock of the time, the band left a remarkable impression on its listeners and became a true revelation. As a result, the activists at the Communist Committee raised concerns about the band's prolific endeavors. The committee led an anti-Meshchan campaign, accusing him of anti-Soviet propaganda. In 1989, Meshchan, along with his family, moved to Boston, where he finally managed to properly record his songs. He recorded his first album called Catharsis, and all the songs thereafter have truly left me at awe with the riveting talent of this man. Although his lyrics are rather dark and dismal, they evoke a very unique emotion, one that I was never familiar with before I stumbled upon his music. I find myself coming back to Meshchan for his authenticity, haunting melodies, and unapologetic lyrics. The Art of Giving, where we spotlight a charitable organization. Since 1950, the Armenian Educational Foundation has been a cornerstone of the Armenian educational movement around the world. It has lent a helping hand to hundreds of students and dozens of schools in numerous nations. Through its many years of giving, it has proven to be one of the most enduring and productive organizations in the diaspora. Their mission is to render financial assistance to Armenian educational institutions and to assist students of Armenian parentage. Projects include school renovations, school supplies, computers, and scholarships. To date, almost 200 schools have been renovated in Armenia, Artsakh, and Jabakh. Today, a greater number of Armenian students are seeking to extend their level of education beyond high school and even college. With the formation of more scholarship funds, AEF can provide additional support to a larger number of these students in colleges and universities in the United States by awarding those pursuing Armenian studies and establishing funds which would focus on specific fields and give financial assistance for academic research. In this way, the Armenian Educational Foundation hopes that it will help young people make lasting contributions to their respective communities. To find out more, please visit aefweb.org. That's a wrap for the Maria Cozette Show. Much love to my guest today, Dr. Vahe Peroomian. To see all of his incredible photography and to find out information about getting his book, his calendar, you can visit vahep.com. And of course, to find out more about our show, you can like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. There are daily updates all the time with fresh, exclusive footage and photos. And that's about it, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and remember to stay creative. Peace.